morning. It's time to do the weekend photos, and it was a particularly interesting week. Now, for those of you guys who have been watching some of these videos and don't know, I've actually been doing a photo a day now for over 10 years, and if you look at my website, if you click singles, then whatever date you want, and then whatever month you want, then you'll be able to basically follow whatever I do on a daily basis. So let's check out some of my favorite photos from the week of April 14th. It started off on a Monday, and I wanted to do a piece on scallops, and you might have seen the other video how the whole project comes together. But on Monday I photographed them unloading the 50-pound bags. This is how scallops actually are unloaded from a fishing boat. They shuck them out at sea and then they throw the shells overboard. But the idea on something like this is basically get in their space, and so that you can feel it and you can see how heavy this actually is, and they have to manually lift it from down below, covered in ice and so on, to unload it onto the pier itself. The next day, this is Tuesday, it was early morning, and I actually, it's funny because I think I've photographed in every nook and cranny in New Bedford by now, but it's always interesting when you just happen to go left because the bridge is closed, and you're like, okay, what's in there? And that's the same kind of thing. I found myself inside this little dock that is behind a fish plant that nobody ever goes there. And I'm sitting there, and the bridge was closed, and for whatever reason, I just kept on looking at the bridge. And then I could see a guy starting to walk across. And the key to a photograph like this is to really accentuate the scale and the historical context, but also make it something that people look at every single day in an interesting context. And the way that this guy is drinking his soda with his headphones on early in the morning, walking across the bridge completely by himself, that's what makes the photograph interesting. The next day we did a story. I started working on a story about foster parents. So I went to this woman's house. It was her and her sister. They've been foster parents for quite a long time, and she's had over 20 kids that she's raised, and she started talking about how every one of them is like her own child, and she started weeping. And it's moments like this, sometimes it's hard to capture that moment because sometimes you get caught up in the whole thing yourself, and you have to really separate yourself and try to really capture the moment, and that's what it is, and using the right lens, waiting for that right moment where, in this case, the light was shining right across the tear that was coming down her cheek. Then I went, this is Thursday I think, and I went to this place that's it's like a mansion that has been the Wamsutta Club since the 1800s, and it's funny, I went there for one reason and I come out with something completely different, and that's always something that I try to talk about every time, is just because you're doing something, the periphery most of the time is what's more interesting than why it is that you're there. Now, I went there to do a piece about how this mansion's not going to become a non-profit, whatever, and great, so I'm walking around looking at what it is, and then I come around a bend and there's all these people playing bridge, which of course I have no idea how to play bridge, but what do I do? What am I supposed to ignore them? No, of course not. So I stick my camera probably where it doesn't belong, and just wait for that moment. And there's that look, and she's looking across at her partner, and you can almost read her mind. She's like, you better be putting something on that table that I can play with. And then the way that this guy's hands are between this here, and you can see the scorecard here, and this guy's holding his cards here. Those are the things that make for a really compelling image. It's not simply what is at first immediately obvious. It's the way that interacts with everything else in the image that makes it strong. This was on Friday. I happen to be driving around the south end of New Bedford, and I see a guy with a wheel. And I photographed him way down back here, near a beach that's back here. So I got his name, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? And it turns out he's a civil engineer, and he's measuring the length of this bike dash walk path, which compromises 3 other paths that are now becoming one. And it was the first time they were measuring it. So I'm like, okay, great. So I left, and I know exactly where this path goes. So I'm going ahead to see, is there something interesting? Because I knew where he had to go. He had to follow the yellow line, right? And sure enough, at Fort Tabor, there was a guy sitting there on a bench right behind where I'm standing, reading a book, and obviously he got there with his bike. So again, anticipate. Go ahead. What is going to happen when this guy gets here? Is there something interesting? And at first, this wasn't really hitting me. It was, I'm looking and I'm looking. Is there something in the background? And it turns out, oh look. So as he was coming up this way, I just sat there, he walked by, I took the shots, and I left. And that was the end of that. So that's my weekend photos. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye.